Ben, a lot of people write books to write a book, but this book came from your heart, did it not?
Yes, this is a very personal book. So about 12 years ago, I went through a really brutal life crisis with my family, kids, and wife. And through that experience and through talking to many people, I was able to make it through that storm. So that's why I wrote this book, Survive the Day. It really has nothing to do with the crisis we're in right now, but it does apply to what we're all going through.
In your first emotions, when it hit you that, boy, something radically is happening in my life, what kept you together? Did so many people early on, we just go to pieces. What stayed the course for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of things, but I mean, specifically, I believe family was critical in helping me move forward, but also finding some really solid Christian counselors. I know there are all kind of people out there in the counsel and therapeutic world, the same thing in the pastoral world, but finding a really good Christian counselor to help you make sense of what's going through and to speak wisdom into your life was really helpful. And I know that for us, most of the time we're in the chair and not on the couch.
Exactly.
So it was interesting being reversed where I was on the couch.
Did it happen just bang, the light came on, all is over, and that's what we want, you know,
Yeah, we
instant,
do.
instant therapy, instant healing.
We do. We want a quick fix. And it really, that didn't happen in my story. And so one of the things that I like about this book, what I talk about, I don't talk about just my struggles, but other people. I talk about circumstances that don't change and circumstances that get worse, that last not only months, but years.
You have to live with it.
You have to live with it. So how do you survive one day at a time, 1 week at a time, to create momentum to move forward? So that's kind of the gist of the book.
What about your kids in the middle of this? How did this affect them? That's got to be your major concern. What would you say to so many parents that are going through all kinds of storms and about their kids? How did that play in?
Yeah.
How did you handle that?
Yeah, I would say stay close to your kids and play the long game and not the short game. I think when we're parenting, so many times, especially when we're going through a crisis in our marriage or our family, we want our child to listen to us now. We want them to obey us now. We want things to be better now. And it's just not that way. So I think you have to play the long game, try to be consistent, stay faithful to your church, stay close to your friends, and stay as close as you can to your kids.
And I would tend to give dogmatic answers then, and I guess that doesn't work either.
Well, I mean, you can give dogmatic answers. It's a matter of whether or not they're going to respond to it. So I don't think you shy away, Dad, from being tough at times, but you also have to be tender and to be patient. And that's tough when you're a parent, at any stage of the parenting game, to be patient. So I just try to maintain patience.
And the end result, what happens? Do you ever get through where you hear the rooster crow in the morning, you hear the sound of the trumpets? Does life come back one day, you say, you know, God's brought me through this, or I'm on the other side now? Do you ever have that feeling?
I think you do. I think that I did in my life, and so many of the people that I interview and talk about in the book who had to raise a special needs child for 30 years and then they pass away, others who lost a child in the prime of their life. And so how they made it through those days and how they got to a point where life is better and there is more strength and more hope. So yes, I think there is the good news that God does bring us through that dark tunnel. I remember someone telling me years ago, actually it was a friend of mine from Mexico, and he said, hey, Ben, there is light at the end of the tunnel and it's not a train. Because when you're going through a crisis and someone gives you that cliche, you think, yeah, I know there's light, it's a train, it's gonna hit me, but there's not. And God gives us the light we need in those dark times, in those dark tunnels, to lead us out into a new path.
And see, that would be a basic principle. Confident that God's a part of this thing, as dark and as forbidding as it is, but there is light here. That's a basic principle, I would think, for anybody going through a crisis. But what are some other principles, 2 or 3 that pops out? That's one. There's light at the end of the tunnel if we do it God's way. What are some other things that, whatever the crisis might be, you'd say, hey, these some things that work for me?
I think one of the most difficult things when you're going through a major life storm is getting stressed out, freaked out, anxiety-ridden about tomorrow or about next week. And I remember years ago when I was a kid, we had Corrie ten Boom come to our church and come over to lunch at our house. And I remember someone asking Corey that question. They're like, how did you make it through the concentration camps in Germany with all the darkness, all the death, all the suffering? And she talked about a story when she was a little girl, and her dad, say, bought them a ticket to go to Amsterdam. He may buy the ticket 3 weeks in advance, but he wouldn't give Corey and her sister the ticket until the day of the journey because he didn't want them to lose it. And so she said the same thing in the concentration camps. God gave me that ticket of grace, that strength, one day at a time to make it through. So that's another principle that I talk about in the book. And it's not mine. Obviously, it's from the Bible. It's from people like Corrie ten Boom. And that God gives us what we need when we need it. It's the same thing he told Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I'm not going to remove the thorn, but my grace is sufficient for you.
It is. You listen to somebody who has endured pain and suffering, gone through all kind of storms, and it's wonderful to be able to listen. Somebody opens their heart to you in a book and says, you know, this will help me. This will speak God's truth into me from the experience of this man.